Hey there, and welcome to That News You Care About, a weekly video game news show from the folks over at That Nerdy Site. Today is Tuesday, March 1st of 2022, and I am one of your hosts, Logan Wilkinson. Joining me this week is my Phoenix son, Trevor Starkey.
Hello.
How you doing, Trev?
I'm hanging in there with, the rest of the world falling apart, as always. I love seeing the tweets of, I'm so tired of the, once in a, 100 years things happening to, our generation.
I think it's important to say that, obviously, if you need to take a break from the overwhelming, everything, I can't even think of a word other than just all of it-ness of the internet right now, definitely do so. Find things that bring you some enjoyment. I've tried to limit my Twitter takes to mostly in the morning and in the evening now, at least in the past couple of days with everything happening in Ukraine. It's also, I saw a really good tweet that kind of made me right, I'm just going to take bring it down a few notches, because it was someone being the suddenness and whiplash-inducingness of seeing people tweet about Pokemon and then seeing people talk about Ukraine. It was too much for a human brain to comprehend, and it's that's sort of where I'm at right now. So yeah.
Yep. That was this week's That Nerdy Site show too. Cameron and I talk about the Pokemon stuff. We talk about our Horizon Zero Dawn thoughts, his Elden Ring thoughts, and then in the shoutouts at the end, he's and also fuck everything that's going on with Greg Abbott in Texas, and fuck Vladimir Putin in Ukraine. Sure. I was all right, yep, that's okay, yep, that's totally how we're ending this one.
Yeah, the Greg Abbott stuff too. But this is going to be hopefully a nice little dollop of sunshine in your podcast feeds this Wednesday morning. Myself and Trevor, with the upcoming release of The Batman, starring Robert Pattinson and Zoe Kravitz, decided we'd take a trip down superhero memory lane and kind of run over our favorite superhero games of really our lives, past 20, 30, not even 20 years anymore. Oh, God. The past 30 plus years now. Trevor, hit me with the first game or games you want to shout out.
So I've got your big heavy hitters, but I figured I would also kind of dabble into some of the more obscure ones that I figured Logan probably won't pull this one. So I'll start out there with Sunset Overdrive. I think is
that's a great pick.
Not specifically a superhero.
I'm glad you picked that, because that'll work with some of
but it is very much in the vein of superhero, and it was very much the prototype for what Insomniac would eventually do with the Spider-Man games, and still my very favorite game on the Xbox series, or the Xbox One series of consoles. Just a ton of fun. Traversal was spectacular. They had a ton of fun kind of creating weird and wild weapons, a la the Ratchet and Clank, games, and the work they'd done on those. And as somebody who hadn't played Ratchet and Clank prior to Sunset Overdrive, it was just a ton of fun. There's a weird, they had Brandon Winfrey as the community manager at the time, I think, and they basically had him play into a lot of the weekly here are the new challenges this week of the game kind of elements, and he became such a character within the game that they also made him the big bad boss of the DLC, which was a whole other flavor of fun. And so it was such a fun I could very easily pull the Arkham games or something like that, or the Spider-Man series. But I think this one is one that flew under the radar for too many people, and still was just such a fun, balls out kind of time.
It had the misfortune, right, of coming out on
It came out on the Xbox console when it was still $500 basically, or when it was just becoming $400 because they pulled the Kinect off of it. But yeah, it was like very early days of the Xbox One, and they had pretty much come out the gate like limping because of the like faults of Phil Spencer's predecessor.
Yeah, it is unfortunate, I think, because it's one of those games that I would really love to play and experience, and I think the time it came out and the console it came out on have kind of always done that game dirty, because I've never heard anyone say anything other than great things about Sunset Overdrive, and just like the look and stylish nature of it really appeals to kind of, I think, my game and aesthetic in 2022. Certainly, that's a great shout out, Trev. That's a great little sleeper one. If you're gonna go for a little fun route, then I'm also gonna go for a little fun route that is like superhero adjacent, which is gonna be Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in Time. And so that's where I'm gonna go. Again, I think superhero adjacent for sure. I think it's a weird like qualifier thing. Comic characters. I actually my secret take about this is that I think there are a lot of great Ninja Turtle games. Or at least the ones that I think are fun and enjoyable. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Turtles in Time, because people would be really upset about it, because they don't let you forget that that's the best Ninja Turtle game often. But really, this is a great stand-in for, I think, a lot of the late 80s, early 90s licensed game beat 'em ups or brawlers.
I was gonna say those are all 90s. Those are all mid 90s. Those were not
mid late 90s.
Those were not the 80s when
I give it some leeway, because I wasn't playing any of these until the
right.
mid to late 90s. So I was but all those games, and I think it kind of defines such a era of licensed titles, right? Like I said before we started recording, I think they're kind of two golden ages of licensed games, and a lot of them are the early-ish to mid 90s, and then the 2000s decade. And this is sort of representative, I think, of that one. It's a ton of fun. I like the Ninja Turtles a lot, and a lot of my friends growing up were even bigger fans of the Ninja Turtles than I was, and really loved that series and really loved those characters, and we all kind of would devise which one we would be, almost always based off of what your favorite color was, because that's how 10-year-olds work. But I like the Ninja Turtles games a lot, because they were one of the only superhero games I played that actually was sort of a gateway into the larger thing, right? By the time I was playing Batman games, I knew who Batman was, or X-Men, I knew who the X-Men were, but playing the Ninja Turtle games were actually when I discovered Ninja Turtles, and then from there went to the TV show and the movies and all that kind of stuff happening at the same time. So yeah, I just wanted to give a shout to that. Those games are great, and I have a lot of really fun memories, either playing them or watching some of my friends play them.
Oh god, now I'm feeling bad, because that one did come out in 91, which means
that's what I thought.
That Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, which is the big arcade game that I played a ton, had to have come out earlier. And was that the late 80s? Ah, Jesus.
When did the first Ninja Turtles movie come out? Do you know that?
I didn't think that was until the 90s, but it might have been.
I'm Googling it right now. 80s. 1990.
Yes, and Secret of the Ooze was 91.
Yeah. Secret of the Ooze is great. I thought so. This is a brief tangent, I guess, but I have to say it because we're on the topic of Ninja Turtles. I had thought everyone really liked Secret of Ooze, and then I discovered recently that some people really do not think it's bad. And I'm that movie's a ton of fun.
I mean, it can be both bad and a ton of fun.
Sure. Again, James Bond.
I would say, yeah, that movie is very, very bad.
I don't know about
when the highlight is, and the thing that people remember about that movie is a Vanilla Ice rap.
The dance, yeah.
Go Ninja, go.
It's a ton of fun.
I don't think that speaks
Super Shredder.
Well for the rest of the movie. Yeah.
Trevor, what is your next game you're going to talk about?
Another one I will pull in here. South Park: The Fractured But Whole.
Ooh, you're going really okay.
That was.
You really took it broad. I like this.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, well, that one in particular is superheroes. As the follow up to the Stick of Truth, they basically decide, hey, let's stop playing fantasy and let's play superheroes, and that's how the game turns on a dime kind of thing.
It's a
And
great pick.
it's a ton of fun in the South Park, vein of humor. I
Hmm.
think this one like nails the humor in the same way that the Stick of Truth did. And as somebody who like grew up with South Park, there's a weird nostalgia to even that.
Hmm.
Um, but it's like it's also them doing a parody of all of the MCU stuff and all of the DC
Hmm.
stuff, in a very fun tongue in cheek way that we just didn't get anywhere else in the video game side of things. I think
Hmm.
maybe the Deadpool game, but I never really actually put time into that.
Mm.
But yeah, just
Mm.
like irreverent South Park humor mixed with superheroes. It was a fun. They did a good job, kind of like improving on and building on um, the the RPG ness of the first game by adding a little bit of like more tactics movement into the combat stuff.
Hmm.
So even that felt like a little evolution. But yeah, the game itself was just like a ton of fun, and it hits that sweet spot of like, oh, like a 15-hour 20-hour RPG. Excellent, this is great. It's not 100 hours into a Final Fantasy or a Dragon Quest, which
Hmm.
those can be fun too, but like the more bite size approach that they took with the South Park RPG games was a ton of fun. And so yes, South Park: The Fractured But Whole was one I wanted to give a shout out to here.
That's a great shout out. That's a really good, clever shout out. Um, I'm gonna go to one of my favorite games of its generation. From 2011, we're gonna go to Sucker Punch's Infamous 2. Another non-traditional superhero character we're kind of going to. We haven't hit any of the big ones actually yet.
Mhm.
Um, I think Infamous 2 is great. Like I really can't stress it enough actually. And this is one of the things that like I am most thankful for Greg Miller for in my life, right? It was listening to him bang the drum so much about Infamous 1 being so good. Get ready for Infamous 2. It's going to be great. It's going to be great. It's going to be great. That like when Infamous 2 came out, I like rented Infamous 1, ran through that game, and then dived into Infamous 2 and was so happy I did, right? I think Infamous 2 takes everything that worked in the first Infamous game and just builds off it so well. I think the location is stronger. I think the themes it's going for are better. I think Cole's a better character. I think it is just a significantly stronger game, leading all the way to it's still one of the I think better like multiple endings a video game is offered, just in how definitively different those two endings are, and it's
Mhm.
great. And yeah, I think that game has such a charm to it. It feels like it has more of a sense of humor than the first one I think had, which I think strove to be more serious, almost like melodramatic at times in the first game. And this one I think was more free and kind of having fun, coloring like out to the playbook a bit more. Um, yeah, I think Infamous 2 is wonderful. And the whole Infamous series could get a nomination, obviously, with what they do with kind of the PS4 games as well, which are both very fun. But I think there is just something to Cole's character and kind of the motley crew he has around them that makes the first Infamous games, and Infamous 2 in particular, so special.
Yeah, the my history with Infamous was because I don't even like I might have been listening to Beyond a little bit around that time, but I feel like I came to them around Beyond 300 is like
300.
the thing that I remember like listening to and seeing like on the front page of IGN and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But uh Infamous 1 was one of the games that PlayStation gave as like a, hey, we're sorry the PlayStation Network was down for so long. And that was that was
That's
the
right.
game that I picked up in the lead up
That's right.
to Infamous 2. So yeah, I hopped in and played it at that time, and had a really fun time with Cole's adventure. I think the first one does have like more hints of like tragedy to it,
Yeah.
just by the nature of its story. And it's also, I think,
Mm-hmm.
like the New York or whatever their
Yeah.
version of New York had like a darker and bleaker tone to it
Yeah.
versus was it New Marais.
Numeray, yeah, absolutely.
That had, you know, the New Orleans kind of like liveliness to
And
it,
the colors, yeah.
and colors and stuff. And I also like the, you know, the expansion of like the power set. As much as I like my, like, whenever I would like make up a superhero in my head and stuff, it would always be a superhero that had like electricity powers. So like I'm predisposed to enjoy a character like Cole.
Be a sucker for it, yeah.
But when that, like, you know, when he got like the fire powers and the ice powers or whatever from the other kind of characters from the other conduits in the second game, I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like we're expanding on this, you know, this power set and using it to do new cool things. Awesome. And yeah, I very much enjoy the PS4 era games too, Second Son and First Light. I think they suffered in this almost in the same vein as Sunset Overdrive, of they came out early enough in the console's life cycle, and they were a departure from the Infamous series. Like the Infamous fan base wasn't interested in a new protagonist. They liked Cole, and they didn't want like a new thing, even if that new thing was Troy Baker. So yeah, I thought, but I enjoyed it. I had a good time with it. It also, like, it did a weird thing with powers where it's like, oh, they're not doing elemental powers like, you know, ice and fire and lightning. They're using neon and paper and concrete, and
it was really cool
and stuff. Which, yeah, cool for like the tech, but not as cool, I think. Not as like
30-hour experience
normal.
Yeah, right. That's
But yeah, still great series. It was definitely a series I had on my list as a shout as well.
Yeah. What's your next game?
Let's go with the Lego Marvel Superheroes and Lego Batman.
That's a great shout
series.
That's a great shout out.
Both, you know, getting the Marvel and the DC side of things. And this is specifically not the like Lego Marvel's Avengers, like the movie tie-in stuff. I'm specifically kind of like, because those are fine, but they're, hey, playing through the movies and whatnot, and you kind of know what you're getting with those games. With the Lego Marvel Superheroes and Lego DC Batman games, like, they were just making original stories with this wide cast of characters and these giant open worlds, and you know, it was a ton of fun seeing just like the obscure deep cuts that they would pull, or little Easter eggs and references that they were pulling into all those, in the vein that you and I have talked, you know, when we a few weeks back when we did the episode about Lego Star Wars, the Skywalker saga. You know, the charm of those TT games, Lego games, is just wonderful, and there's just a lot of joy and fun to them. And a lot of like fan service to them. So yeah, wanted to give those ones a shout as well. And I think Lego Marvel Superheroes was like one of the first PS4 games I played, because it was one of those, like, at launch they had like the PS3 version and the PS4 version ready to go, and so I was like, well, I'll play the PS4 version on my brand new console, kind of thing.
That's those are Lego Batman in particular is a great shout. I mean, still good that obviously from his breakout role in the Lego movie, got like his own Lego Batman movie as well. That's a really fun shout out. My next game, we're gonna go X-Men related, and in particular we're gonna go let me pull it up here so I get the exact title right. It's not some bullshit thing I have to get wrong. X-Men Origins Wolverine, or X-Men Origins Wolverine. And the reason being because there are a lot of fun X-Men games, but I think this game is one of those. This is a great example, actually, Trevor, of Secret of Ooze, where it is like, is it a good game? I don't know. Probably not. In fact, it might be a bad game or like a bland game. But it is never not enjoyable or fun to play as Wolverine and have an entire game centered around that. And in what is probably the worst Wolverine movie, it is... let me rephrase that. In what is the worst Wolverine movie, it is fun to play out some of the more absurd and ridiculous elements of that movie in a video game form, right? And I mean, again, like, it's never not fun to be Wolverine. The new Wolverine game we're going to get in 2025 will be fun to play if for no other reason than you're Wolverine, right? Like, if it just gives you that and it feels even somewhat good, you're playing a character who I've always loved and has always been one of my favorite superheroes. And so, I think it is charming. It is not particularly great, but it's a ton of fun. And it's one that circa, X-Men Origins would have been like 2008 or 9, somewhere in that time period, like right around like my senior year of high school, right? So it was like me and like, Brandon and Josh and like, the crew back home all like trading off the controller, right? And playing each other, like all the games you played at the time. And this is a great example of us kind of like watching this game. Is it great? No, but it was a ton of fun to like play together and kind of riff on as we went through it.
Yeah, I never played that one, but I have heard like that they did a good job. They did Wolverine right with that game.
Yeah, I think so.
Like all the more like to be almost surprised because it was a movie tie-in that came out like almost day and date with the movie in 2009. Yeah,
I think Wolverine feels good in that game. Again, that's why like the story itself is nonsense, but like he feels pretty good.
Yeah. In that vein, I have on my list the X-Men Legends games that would then kind of evolve into the Marvel Ultimate Alliance games.
Absolutely,
because those were a ton of fun, and I specifically
very similar
loved the X-Men Legends games back in like the PS2 era, and always had Wolverine out there like leading my squad. Basically, was like that was who I was driving with, and then I had my 3 other characters. Be they X-Men or eventually, the larger Marvel universe. But yeah, lots of fun, just kind of like hack and slash nonsense, and just beating things up with those guys.
Looking at the X-Men Legends box art, I immediately was like, "Fuck yes!" I played that game so much. Yeah, that's like, and maybe it's partially just like an age thing, but like. And like as games have changed, but like man, like junior high to like high school, those were such great games to play because it like I don't know, like, and again I don't know if it's just because like we're in the right age at that point in time to really enjoy those kind of like hack and slash or beat 'em up or whatever you want to kind of thing. But those games were so much fun back then, and it helped that games were I guess different too. But
and again,
ton of fun.
For me, I was definitely already in college.
when those college is still a similar concept, and I think in terms of like being young and like having a lot of free time and just like like playing that kind of shit.
Yeah.
Those games are good. That's a great shout out, Trevor. I will next give a shout out to Injustice: Gods Among Us.
It was on my list too. Yep.
Perfect. I think, and I'm pretty sure we're on the same page on this, if I'm not mistaken. We are bad at fighting games.
Yes.
Certainly I am bad at fighting games. I'm not particularly adept at them. Like that is pretty much the only game you're ever going to find me like really be like, I can only play this on easy. I really just don't even know how people do it beyond that, let alone like when they get to harder difficulties. And like the actual fighting itself is like fun, but like not what I'm here for. I think Injustice has one of the coolest story ideas of any superhero game. I think it is so smart and clever. And I could like watch the like YouTube, movie of all the different cutscenes in that game any day of the week and just have a blast. It is so superhero. It is so like in all the best sense, like operatic and larger than life and absurd and cartoony and violent and just doing such a cool twist on these characters that you know and love. Obviously, most famously, Superman being essentially evil. And just like the opening of that game with him killing Joker, like it is such a cool idea for a story, let alone one that you can then kind of interact with and play around in. And the different, I think, characters and beats that story twists and turns on is so much of why I think so many of us love superheroes, and that their stories are just bananas and bonkers and silly and goofy, and even when they're dark and brooding and angsty, it is still just very silly and fun. And it is such a cool version of a superhero story told, and I think Injustice is rad, and I cannot give it enough shout out and praise. I think that's such a cool idea for a superhero story.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. That was because what there were like before that there was a DC versus Mortal Kombat game, right? That was that it was essentially like the proof of concept for Injustice, but like the superheroes were still superheroes, so they couldn't have fatalities. Whereas like Injustice was like, oh, like yeah,
they're straight up
go
fucking,
nuts. You can absolutely like wreck everybody because and so they gave like NetherRealm
2013. That's crazy.
Basically like the reins on that. Absolutely a stellar story, which is like it's funny, obviously, like Cameron will absolutely be out there like championing the stories of fighting games, but obviously like they're not typically what fighting games are celebrated for, but I think Injustice is one of those, like that's the exception of like, people took notice as like, oh, this is just a really great DC story with like the trappings of a fighting game. In that spirit, I will also give a shout out to the Marvel vs. Capcom games, which not necessarily Marvel vs. Capcom 3, which a lot of people did not like, but like the Marvel vs. Capcom like 1 and 2 arcade games of like my youth and of seemingly that same era of like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or the X-Men arcade games, stuff like that. Like those were like, even as somebody who wasn't like good at fighting games, button mashing as Cyclops and the Hulk or whatever, and taking out various, like taking out Ryu and stuff from Capcom was like a wild thing. Just the lightest of nods to that one. It's definitely not like a high up on my list one, but I think it is one of the standouts of using superheroes in video games well.
All right, I'll be in our game of chicken. I'll be the one who blinks and does it. I will give a shout out to, in particular, Batman: Arkham Asylum and Arkham City. Obviously, we have to. It is the elephant in the room in so many ways. I mean, they're great. We could literally do a whole podcast in the Arkham games, obviously, and just go through each of those four. But I think what Arkham Asylum did and still does, I think that game, I mean, it's been a few since I played it, but not too long. I think is one of the best created video game worlds I still probably ever played in. It is such a fun sandbox filled with so many little like clues and winks and nods to Batman's long history. And the fact that world feels so lived in, and the villains of Arkham Asylum feel so present, even though in actuality you only meet like 4 or 5 villains in that game, I think is a testament to the quality of the environmental storytelling they did there. And what it did for Batman, what it did for Joker, what it did for Scarecrow, who instantly made him, that is maybe a lot of people's favorite version of Scarecrow as a character is in Batman Arkham Asylum. Not Batman Begins, not in the animated series for sure, but here. And it's so well done. And then for them to take that and, at least in my opinion, then triumph over that, right, and do that better with Arkham City, which I think is still in the running at the very least for being my favorite Batman story. If probably only behind The Dark Knight and like 1 or 2 other stories. I think Arkham City is fantastic and a really, really great Batman and Joker kind of dual story being tracked out there. The stuff it has with like Ra's al Ghul and Talia, I think is fantastic. The Mr. Freeze boss fight is still one of my favorite video game boss fights. 10 years later now? God. I think Arkham City is an absolute masterclass. It is one of my favorite, games of all time. I can rant and rave about it all night long. I think Arkham City is another iconic video game, like set in a world that feels so lived in. I think the opening of that game is Bruce Wayne is one of my favorite video game moments, and just like the scene of him putting on the bat suit is still like chills inducing. I think there's so much good about the Arkham games, but the last thing I really want to highlight is one of, I think, the things that seems the most basic, but that does so much to make those games special, which is basically making quasi everything canon. And so like making Batman's entire like 70-year history sort of canon for this Batman is like a thing that is sort of bonkers on the face of it, but like works really well in terms of like having a Batman who is, you know, 2 decades basically into like his Batman run, right? Or like, you know, significantly into it and has had multiple Robins and, you know, has a son hinted at maybe in Arkham City, and then kind of that gets its own stuff. Like I think it is such an ingenious thing because then it lets, no matter where you stopped reading Batman comics or no matter where you left off in the Batman animated series, or if you just watched the movies and know like a few kind of ancillary things from there, you can pick it up and be like, oh, this is my Batman. I know these beats. I know these characters, and it still work. And I think it is an absolute testament to the storytelling of that game, and something that Marvel Spider-Man, which I'm sure we'll get to soon, similarly did. And I think it works just as well there. It is such a great series of games.
Speaking of, actually, before, Marvel's Spider-Man is like the last one on my list, but I do want to give a quick shout out here of a game that like I played and I remember enjoying, but I feel like I never got really too far into it, and so it didn't leave like a lasting impression. But Beautiful Joe of the GameCube era was a fun little like
That was an unexpected one.
Fun little it was a weird time for like a non big franchise superhero game to be coming out, and admittedly because I didn't play a ton on my GameCube, I just probably never put too much time into it, but shout out to that one being the last one unmentioned on my list here. But yes, I think the again kind of bookending this with the Insomniac games, starting with Sunset Overdrive, and then kind of my last one here being the Spider-Man and Spider-Man Miles Morales games of recent years were just like such a joy as a huge fan of the character. I think the Spider-Man, their approach to Peter Parker, and the idea of making Peter a Peter who's been Spider-Man for years and is like well established in the role, does that thing that like we got so tired of in the movie side of things, of like we didn't need his origin story because we understood it, and the game gives you enough of it through like the little collectibles and things around the world. And kind of like it creates its own history of like the adventures he's had before, and I think it builds to a really fun Sinister Six storyline, in a way that like you could do over the length of a video game that is a lot harder to do over the length of a 2-hour movie. Not that it can't be done, but like it was I think very well executed in the games, and then the Miles Morales as like kind of the proof of concept of their almost lost legacy for like the Uncharted series, of like here's a smaller story that we can do using all the same toys that we have for this engine, and to tell a fun Miles story that hits a lot of great beats for Miles, and like unfortunately hits some of the same beats that Into the Spider-Verse had hit a couple years earlier, but still like hits them very well in their own regard, and leaves me incredibly excited for like when the two of them team up in a Spider-Man 2. And the like my ultimate hope that I've like tweeted about in the past is I hope we get a Spider-Man 2, and then much like with Miles Morales, I hope we get like a Gwen Stacy spin-off story, and then like just a full-blown Spider-Verse as like their Spider-Man 3 kind of adventure, because I think there's just a ton of fun that they can have in that universe, and I look forward to Insomniac playing in there for many years to come.
Absolutely. That is a great shout out and a great, I think, set of games to end on. Spider-Man's always good. I really have just been thinking recently, I was just like, I should just hop back into the game for no other reason than just like spend an hour just like swinging through New York City. There is just, and I think the Batman game simulates a moment in terms of just like soaring through Gotham City. Like there is just something to that, I think, of just like spending 30 minutes just like swinging through the skyline or soaring over the roofs of Gotham or New York City. And those two series is just like pure bliss. It is so relaxing.
Yeah.
I never tire of it.
It is an incredible testament in this era where like fast travel is very commonplace in these games.
Yeah,
and
that's a great game.
and to make a world and make a traversal through that world fun and engaging enough that you would rather do that than just fast travel.
That's a great point.
I think is a shout out to both those games and like designing the characters and that traversal for the worlds they exist in. I would say even in like Arkham Knight, like adding the Batmobile as like another way of being able to get around that city quickly helps, make that game as fun as it is as well, even if you have grievances with like the stealth tank sequences or whatever.
Sure. How much was used. Yeah, that's a really great point to bring up. Those games are both, in so many ways, the Marvel Spider-Man game is just the spiritual successor to the Arkham series and what it did in terms of like revolutionizing, I think, superhero games, and also just being legitimately one of the best interpretations of that character. I think both those series very much stand up as that.
And I would say just on that last note of like, obviously the combat and counter system that the Arkham games kind of introduced, like changed those kinds of action games for the foreseeable future, including in Spider-Man. But what's great is like when you have that aha moment in Spider-Man of, oh, if I just try and be Batman, these guys are going to take me out. But if I try and use that same, like those same mechanics from Batman, but as Spider-Man and in the air, and like whipping enemies up and taking them out up there, like that's such a thrilling, joyous feeling of like, like webbing somebody up in the air, knocking them out to build up a combo meter, and then like whipping somebody else up and basically like spending more of your fight time in the air and bringing everybody up to you in a way that Batman can't do, because Batman has to be kind of on the ground for those fights.
I'm glad you mentioned, I mean, so that takes me to like, my favorite way to play the Arkham games has always been to do like the Predator shit, right? Yeah. Of like, and then like it never feels old in a similar way. I think like the Marvel Spider-Man game of like, you said it so well, of like bringing the fight to you in both those cases, whether it's, on top of a gargoyle and snapping a guy up or being Spider-Man and webbing someone up. Like it feels like how that character would fight and how they would try to interact. Like obviously, even if you're Batman and are basically just like fucking indestructible, if you can do it easier, you're going to. It's a long night, right? And so, I love how they each do their own twist on kind of that mechanic and that kind of way of thinking. It is all those games are so fantastically and so well made.
Yeah, and lots of like fun gadgets and fan service galore across like across both those franchises. Yeah, in the different costumes you can get, in obviously all the Easter eggs and collectibles you can find, all that fun stuff.
The Tobey Maguire Spider suit, you can get the Batman animated series or the Christian Bale Batman bat suit. I always really loved. Absolutely, there's a lot of great stuff. The Adam West one looks nightmarish on that Batman. But those are some of our favorite superhero games. Be sure to let us know what some of yours are in the comments or on Twitter. Otherwise, Trevor, you said you don't have any shout outs.
Not this week.
I will just tell everyone to go check out all the great The Batman writings out there. There's a lot of cool writing on the film and character himself, both review and otherwise. I'll give a shout out to one from The Ringer, which talks about Batman Returns. They're doing like a whole like celebration, like week-long thing on Batman. And they have one on Batman Returns and how it is such a great like gothic Batman experience, and I read it yesterday and really loved it a lot. So go check out that. I think it's a ton of fun. Otherwise, you can go find the podcast at your podcast service of your choice, where you can like, subscribe, share with your friends, rate and review us on iTunes. It really does help bump us up and get more eyes and ears on the show. You can also go find us at youtube.com/thatnerdysite, where you can find all of the amazing video content we have. We are doing stuff 6 days a week over there. It is action-packed. So go check that out. Go check out all the Let's Plays that go live every Tuesday and Thursday. Go check out that Bond Show, the video-only series on YouTube every Saturday. And all the podcasts dropping Monday through Friday. In addition to that, you can also go to thatnerdysite.com and check out all the written content and reviews, features going live there, as well as also the podcast. Otherwise, you can go find Trevor at Trevor J. Starkey on the internet. Trev, anything you want to plug?
Yeah, I finally got my 2021 favorite games write-up done and up on the site. So you can go check that out over at thatnerdysite.com. Like my top 10 were locked in and had been since our Game of the Year conversation and stuff. But since I always play a butt ton of games every year, I wanted to give a little bit of love to the other ones, some of the other ones that I played as well. So I did yet another top 20 as I have in years past.
That is an excellent shout out. Go do that. My write-up is also finished. I just need to put it in CMS. That's a great reminder. So I will do that probably as soon as I'm done with this podcast. And so you can go check that out soon. Otherwise, you can go find me at Lefty Logie or Lefty Loggy on the internet, LOGGY. I will echo that shout out to go check out all the great Game of the Year content we did. It was a ton of fun and really good conversation this year. I think in a great kind of eclectic 2021 year of games. In addition to that, you can go check out that D Plus show, which is one of my favorite podcasts you always appear on. It's a ton of fun. Stay tuned for all the good stuff we have to come. And go check out the backlogs of all the great series we've done, like the Summer of Star Wars, which is a lot of fun. And I think one of our better shows. Otherwise, you can go over to thatnerdysite.com. And in addition to that, you can, hope you really enjoy the show. For myself, for Trevor, for all of us here at That News You Care About and That Nerdy Site, play your games and be good to each other. Class dismissed.